This rolled into early 2006, where once more I mustered up the courage to begin attending the college and career ministry again. So at this point, this is the only social outlet which I've allowed myself to have. And something happened which was unexpected. I was asked to become more involved in the ministry itself, to be more than an attendee. And that's something which I wasn't going to allow to happen. The first being that this triggered, once more, the feelings of being a complete moral hypocrite. This was something which had led to withdrawing from the nursery ministry back in 2001. And in addition to that, I felt that I could not afford the additional exposure because it would increase the possibility of being found out. And I figured that I knew what would happen if that were to occur. I would be embarrassed, I would be excoriated by the other members of the church, and I would either get thrown out or I would end up in these appointments, like my brother had and was still in at this point. So at that point, I stopped attending the college and career ministry. And also, shortly after that, I stopped attending Sunday services and the men's study as well. It's something which I just could not gather myself to do anymore. The feelings of being a moral failure and not living up to the expectations of the church were too great. It's like I can very specifically remember many instances where I would drive all the way to the church but then pull off into the Walmart parking lot. There's a Walmart like right across the street from the church, and I would pull off over there and then drive back home because I could not go through the doors. So at that point, I was not attending church at all anymore. And also something which I hadn't specifically noticed around that time, although I did later, was it was around this time that these appointments which my brother had stopped. The lack of appointments also signaled my brother's exit from the church at around the same time. And this was seen within the family and the church community as particularly tragic because he was the one who had been on the worship team in the junior high and high school groups, and he was the one who had been groomed to be a worship pastor because this had been seen as God's calling for his life. And that particular vision had been dashed to pieces because he was an unrepentant sinner who didn't want to stick with the program. So, in a way, both he and I became prodigals around the same time in the middle of 2006, even though people knew why he was no longer attending church, but for me, it was still a mystery to everyone else. So I continued the movie-going habit around this time, though. So I still had my chosen outlet for empathy or solace without having to make myself vulnerable to anyone else. So something which happened in the latter half of 2006, though, was my brother began working at Starbucks, and he very quickly assembled a new group of friends. This was something which he had no difficulty with in the past either. And he seemed quite content with this new group of friends and very comfortable with them. But at the time, I kept myself at a complete distance from it all, because what he had gone through was something I didn't want to even think about yet. So this state of feeling like the prodigal and the lost cause continued through the beginning of 2007, but then something happened which was entirely unexpected. So there was a particular Christian recording artist, Margaret Becker, and she hadn't released any new material of her own since 1999. And it was then announced on her MySpace page that she was going to be releasing a new album. And she had posted some new songs from that album. And there was one particular song which resonated with me more strongly than a lot of Christian-related paraphernalia had done in a very long time. And I will go ahead and link to the song if you'd like to listen to it. But, the main message which I got from the song, which I was then able to apply to myself, was the idea that God had not given up on me, and that God had not forgotten about me, despite all of the feelings of exclusion, or feelings of hypocrisy, or feelings of being a disappointment, that he wasn't done with me yet, and that I was not consigned to remaining in this state of limbo and being the prodigal forever, that change would be possible. So I felt that I had a ray of hope at that point. But the process of reintegrating into the church took considerably more time. So fast forward about 6 months. So this was around October or November of 2007. And I was with a cousin of mine. And I'm not exactly sure how this conversation was led into. I've simply forgotten how that happened. But we had gotten to talking about my brother, and how he was no longer attending church either. I saw that as an item of concern. So she began telling me things of what happened to him that I didn't know, because I didn't allow myself to ask them, because I felt I needed to keep my distance from the situation, lest I expose myself. So she kind of made it clear the things that I had originally been afraid of from this church community were things which actually happened. So what actually happened was, in confidence, he had let a friend know about his struggle, because this particular girl was experiencing similar temptations. So what happened was that this particular girl broke his confidence and told the youth pastor. And somehow, shortly after that, everyone in the high school group found out as well. So his secret was out. And he was subsequently abandoned by all of his friends because he was a sinner. And he was placed into a pastoral counseling program, which was designed to, fix the sin problem. And additionally, this was regarding fixing so-called gender issues. Yeah, that kind of thing. And eventually he just couldn't take that anymore because he was extremely depressed and feeling worthless, and he needed to get the hell out of there. So he did. So, and it took quite a while to muster up the courage to ask this question, which was kind of a silly question, but it's something which I also needed to work through. So the question which I was able to ask my cousin at this point was if any of this was because of me. Because, somehow, him knowing about me would have somehow led him going down the same road, or opening up that kind of opportunity, or something like that. It's like, yes, I know how preposterous that is, but that's how I was thinking at the time. And, she made it quite clear that no, that really wasn't the case. That was the first time that I allowed myself to be vulnerable with anyone about what I considered my personal struggle. But it was also the last time I allowed myself to be that vulnerable with anyone else for a considerable amount of time. So let's fast forward a few more months into the beginning of 2008. And the conversation which I had and the song which I mentioned before, they're still working on me. They're still working on my thoughts. And I'm beginning to think at this point, I need to get this problem under control, regardless of what I would consider the personal costs. This is because, all this time, I've been wanting, God to reveal His plan for my life to me, and it hasn't happened yet. And, the reason which I felt that this wasn't happening is because I had not fully surrendered this area of my life to God. And there was another song which I came across around this time, which I'll link to here as well, which I felt made me, again, rethink, my own motivations. Why am I making the decisions that I'm making? Am doing it because I want to think that I can fix this problem just between me and God, even though that has not worked up to this point? Or am I going to do whatever I need to do to fix this problem, uproot the sin, and move on? And it was around that time that I made the decision to enter into a pastoral counseling program like the one my brother had been involved in previously. And had failed from my point of view at the time and the point of view of the church, that I would be able to make this system work. So it was in July of 2008 that I had my first counseling session, and that's where a great deal more insanity started.